So you already read over some of the questions in you, so you know what to expect. Okay. Starting off with something light and not so serious, who's your favorite woman hero and why, not including family?
My favorite woman, just period, okay. Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
And you have a reason?
Oh, yes. Well, Elizabeth was the brains behind the suffrage movement, and she was a visionary. She was very smart and understood why women's place in society was restricted, and she spent her life trying to pass legislation and public policy, especially focusing on the vote, right to vote, so women could be active participants in our democracy as full citizens.
Before college, what did you plan on doing?
Before college, well, at one time I thought about going into criminal justice, but I guess my expectations, because the culture was different when I was a teenage girl, I thought I would get married and have a family. And I guess be a stay-at-home mom. That was, but no, I also, in the 9th grade, I took, that was 6th grade. Miss Cobb was my teacher, and I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, and I really did like civics and government, that class. So one day I raised my hand, and she looked at me and she said, yes. She says, well, I told her when I grow up, I'm going to run for office, public office. And I'll never forget this. She rolled her eyes like, oh, yeah, sure you are. And that just made me mad. I went, I am going to run for public office one day. And so what I've realized now, now that I know a lot about women's history and women in government, she probably did that because I don't know if there were ever any women in Alabama in public office when I said that. So she was rolling her eyes knowing that women aren't elected to office.
What work and motivation did it take you to get to the position or job you are in currently?
Well, I guess I've had a lot of really good opportunities. And what is the work that, say that again?
Oh, the work that and motivation did it take for you to get there? Like, did you have to take internships or?
Well, what happened was I went to college, and initially when I went to college, I thought I was just going there to find someone to get married to. And so then I realized maybe I'm not going to find somebody I want to marry, so I better get serious about my studies.
Right.
So then I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to support myself someday. So I started I was motivated to graduate from college, and I always decided I would take the high road, that I wasn't just going to settle for anybody. I was only going to marry somebody really good. So I graduated from college, and I was not married. So sure enough, I had to take care of myself. So I thought, well, what do I want? Do I want a man or a job? And I thought, no, I really want a job because whoever I marry, they might die, and I'm going to have to support myself anyway.
Right.
So, I mean, this is crazy, I know. So I got a job, and I was initially working at a bank. I got a undergraduate degree in human relations, which was a social psychology degree, and I minored in history. So originally when I got out of college, I couldn't find a job. So for 6 months I worked for a bank, but then I did get on as a social worker for the state government of Alabama, the Welfare and Pensions Office, and I had a caseload of 150 women on welfare. So I was supposed to make home visits. So these were all mothers. I was barely 21. I had no knowledge of parenting. So these women really taught me a lot more than I taught them. But then I also did volunteer work at the crisis center, answering telephone calls. So my experience working at the crisis center caused me to meet my husband, who was in medical school. And so after he graduated from medical school, we got married, and we moved to the Nashville, Tennessee, and in Nashville I got a master's degree in social work. So it worked out well. He put me through school, my graduate school.
Yeah.
And so then we, when I got out of graduate school, I did have my first son, and we moved to Louisville, Kentucky in 1979. And my oldest son was just 6 weeks old when we moved to Louisville in 1979. And my husband took a job at the University of Louisville. And I was a stay-at-home mom. But really, one of the most important things I did then, started doing volunteer work from the National Council of Jewish Women. And the National Council of Jewish Women, I had these fabulous women, older women, that were my mentors. And so I had unbelievable opportunities. In 1980, right after I first moved here, I got to go to the Kentucky General Assembly and testify before a legislative committee supporting funding for domestic violence shelters.
Oh, wow.
And then when I went there and I saw the legislators, I thought, oh, I was going to run for office. And I looked at the round. I went, I think I can do a lot better job than these other men that are here. And so I remember that. I went, but the good thing about the National Council of Jewish Women is we had these meetings in Washington, D.C., national meetings, and I got to meet all our congressmen in Washington, D.C. We had White House briefings, State Department briefings, and this was all in a volunteer capacity. And I learned how, to write testimony. I learned all these public policy skills that I had never learned in formal education. So that was really my launching pad. I also got involved with the National Council of Jewish Women with with Kentucky Youth Advocates, which is a child advocacy nonprofit. I also helped start, I got involved with Foster Care Review Board. So in a volunteer capacity, I had unbelievable opportunities to learn and to contribute. So it's like one thing led to another thing. So I just kept on moving. So I started out as a child advocate. But then the light bulb kind of dawned on me. If you care about children, you have to care about their mothers, because children are poor because their mothers are poor. And so then I really got more involved with women's issues. And there was another other organization. We formed something called Kentucky Women Advocates, and it was a coalition of the National Council of Jewish Women and now the National Organization for Women and the American Association of University Women and groups like that, because we all had the same agenda, so we had more strength in numbers when we went to Frankfurt to lobby and testify on equal pay, child care, continuing to advocate for domestic violence funding and all those issues. So that was in the 80s. And so I also, through the National Council of Jewish Women, was able to help form CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates, that was formed in about 1986. It was the National Council of Jewish Women, it was some of the judges and the Jefferson County judicial system helped, and then Family and Children Services, a nonprofit. We were all partners. So I learned about working through other, forming coalitions with other organizations to create nonprofits. So I was very pleased with that. But then I went from being more of a child's advocate to being more a women's rights advocate, and got involved with this Kentucky Women Advocates. And we had these women's summits around the state, and so I got to build a statewide network of other women all across the state. And then in 1988, I ran for state representative, like I had planned to do. And it was a very wonderful opportunity. I met so many people and felt like it was a very successful campaign, except I didn't win. But the good thing is, I learned a lot about the community. I learned a lot about state government, even more in politics in particular. And so I lost the race, but I had built another new network of people that shared my same values. So especially Sherry Jelsma, who was, and she was on the Board of Education in Louisville, but she was also running Lieutenant Governor Brereton Jones' campaign for governor. And so then I started helping her after I lost my race in 88, started helping him in 89. And when he was elected governor, he appointed me to be head of the Kentucky Commission on Women, which is a state government position. And so then that gave me a whole new realm of opportunities. I don't know. Does that tell you I'm answering way too long? You asked me what motivated or what?
What motivated you to get to the place you are now?
Right. So
that did.
Yeah. So I mean, I could go on and on, but maybe you want to ask me another question.
Okay. Did you receive help along the way of your journey to where you are now, like by a mentor, a parent, a counselor, or anything like that?
Well, yes, I've had many mentors. I would say that the National Council of Jewish Women really launched me. I also have a remarkable mother who is very supportive, and my husband was very supportive. And fortunately, I just had access to resources that allowed me to follow my passion and heart. So,
that's good.
But I would say the women with the National Council of Jewish Women were excellent in helping me get started here in Louisville.
How was your overall experience in school and universities? Were you the only woman in your classes at universities, and did you feel like you were the only woman in the room ever? And do you care to share that experience?
Well, actually, I grew up in Alabama, and I went to Samford University, which was a private Baptist college. And I did notice, I did realize when I was there, we had curfews. The female students had to be in at 10 o'clock at night, and the boys did not. And there were dress codes. We could not wear pants.
Oh, wow.
We had to always dress up, and of course there were. So I started noticing discrimination there. And plus, after I realized when I graduated from college, even though I had minored in history, I had never learned any women's history. All of the American history I had learned was based on mostly wars.
Yeah.
You know, that's how we define our history. So I learned when I was in college that there were some injustices, but it was a very conservative place.
Yeah.
So not to the extent that I would later learn. But I mean, it was a positive experience in terms, I did get a good education.
Yeah.
And, I had good friends.
That's good. That's good. How did you think your professors envisioned you?
I think that I was well liked, and they were supportive of me. Yeah, it was a positive experience, other than now that I know it was, as my mother said, when I was in college, she says, you're living in a fantasy world. The real world is not where you exist. So I was somewhat in a bubble. Yeah. But I got a good education.
That's good. Did you have any female professors?
Yes, I had a female professor. Her name was Mrs. Washington. I think her last name was Mary Washington. She was a really good history professor. So that's a good question. I think she was one of the few women professors I had. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Did she support you in your role to want to run for state representative and all that?
Oh, no, I didn't even ask her about that. I was kind of off in a different place at that time.
How do you feel working in your job now, and do you feel fair treatment between you and the opposite sex?
Well, mostly what I do in my passions is volunteer work.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And so I'm not in a workplace setting.
Yeah.
Now, just to aside, my husband and I own some rental property, so that I manage. So I'm an entrepreneur. My husband and I, so that having that rental property gives me the income to do my volunteer work.
What about whenever you were running for state representative and any of that, did you feel like people treated you fairly when you were running? Do you feel like you got there was a lot of prejudices against you when you were running compared to any of the male candidates,
Well, I think it's a lot more difficult for women to raise money, and that's why they don't run for office, because you have to have money. And often when women run for office, if they don't win, then they don't run again. If they get their feelings hurt or something. Yeah. Well, I did end up running for office again, and I lost a second time. But like a man, they'll lose. They'll just keep on running. Right. Abraham Lincoln, he ran 12 times. Right. So see, I mean, that's the whole thing. But I think it's our culture how women are socialized that we're not supposed to ask for money or ask for things.
Right.
So I had a really good friend that was also running for state representative at the same time. So we were very supportive of one another.
That's good.
So about the guys being blatantly sexist, I mean, I can't say I noticed it other than probably the culture of not being able to. But I did raise more money than I thought I would.
That's
So
good.
people were supportive in that way.
What are some of your future plans and goals in life?
Well, I have several. One thing, my future plans and goals that I'm really focusing on now, really excited about, is in 2020, August 26th, the year 2020, it will be the 100th anniversary of when women got the right to vote. So I'm really working very hard.
You're working with some LGL girls, aren't you, on that?
Right, yes,
Yeah.
right. Because I'm actually, maybe I should give you a little bit more background from when I was on the Commission on Women till how I got to here. Because it's interesting to go back and see how life evolves. One thing builds on another, and it keeps building. So during my years at the Commission on Women, I did a lot of exciting, I think, pretty successful things. One I did is that back to my domestic violence issues, I met my idea when I first took office is when I left office, I would get the governor to grant clemency to women who had killed their abusers or were in prison for domestic violence. So as it turns out, when I was at the Commission on Women, I went to the prison and met some women who had this group, that battered offender self-help group, that were in prison because they had either attempted to kill or conspired to kill their abuser. And they were just protecting their children and themselves.
Right.
It was purely self-defense. So I suggested they make a quilt because a long time ago, when women didn't have a voice, couldn't speak in public, they expressed themselves through their quilts. That's what a lot of women's history is in their quilts. Because, so I suggested they make a quilt to give their voice. And as it turned out, the governor and they put the quilt at the state fair, and then the governor saw the quilt, and he cried when he saw the quilt, and he let the women out of prison.
Oh, wow.
So, but there's a lot of other things involved with all that. It just didn't go this point A to point B, and a lot of people involved helping with this initiative. So, and then at the Commission on Women, in 1995, it was the 75th anniversary of when women got the right to vote. So the Commission on Women, we had a big exhibit at the state fair. Actually, that's why the governor was with us, and I was able to show him the quilt. So we were at the state fair, and in preparation for all that, I had to do research to learn about the history of women getting the right to vote. And that's when I discovered Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And I got really upset because I went, why did I know Elizabeth? She's so famous and did so many great things. And then I realized I had never been taught it at school. And to this day, it's still not taught at school. And so then that changed my life. My two future goals then was women's history. And so that I would try to, educate as many people as I could about the history of women. Now, you heard a lot of this stuff when I spoke in LGL, so you kind of know my story. You know my story, so I don't have to give you the details. But, so that was all just great. So now, almost 25 years later, we're still working on the 100th celebration. So it's been very exciting because I think in 2020, hopefully we'll have the first woman president.
Hopefully.
And I think people are really starting to look at this history and care about it, because up until now, people really didn't care. Well, who cares about that?
Right.
Have I answered your question?
No, you have. You're giving me lots of good information.
Okay.
And then lastly, well, not lastly, but do you have any advice to your high school self and to other young women now?
Well, that's the reason, I don't know if I'm going to tell you about starting Louisville Girls Leadership. Did I talk to y'all about that?
I think I think a little bit.
Well, what happened was, after I was at the Commission on Women,
Mhm.
I was elected to the National Board of Girl Scouts of the USA,
Mhm.
and I got very interested in girls' issues.
Mhm.
And and I figured if I had known when I was a girl
Mhm.
what I know now, I could have really
Right.
made
Done a
more
lot.
change. So I really want girls to know about public policy and all these, and how to speak up for yourself, and
Right.
stand. And so, so you know, Louisville Girls Leadership was
Yeah.
formed, and the thing that I'm just like died and going to heaven about is that Kelsey was in the program, and now it's been taken over, which is great, with young professional women, the millenniums. I don't know if you saw Sunday's paper, but the president of the board of Louisville Girls Leadership, Bailey Rose, was on the front page of the Courier Journal
wow.
discussing Give Local Louisville, you know,
Yeah.
and about the great. So she is doing awesome. And kind of a side to all this, I hate to go sidetrack about
It's
Bailey
okay.
Rose. Well, the way I know her is this young man named Eric introduced me. Eric is the great grandson of Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
Oh, wow.
And he connected me to Bailey Rose because she was moving here to
Yeah.
practice law. And I encouraged her to get on the board of Louisville Girls Leadership, and now she's the president.
It's amazing.
And plus she's really, Bailey wants to run for office. You should interview Bailey.
Really? Oh.
She's in that Emerge class. She's a lawyer at a big law firm in town, and she wants to run for office. And so then she got involved in Louisville Girls Leadership. So see, it goes back to Elizabeth Cady Stanton. I mean, you know, it's so awesome.
It is.
So anyway, I was just so pleased that Bailey and the young women and Kelsey and all some of the women were informed. They have just taken the ball and run with it. It's like, what greater gift could I have than see this just growing and coming on so
I love
strong?
Louisville Girls Leadership. Like, Louisville Girls Leadership influenced me to do this project.
I was wondering about it. I was going to ask you what made you want to do this project.
It made me, I think Louisville Girl Leadership, when I came in as a sophomore, like now I'm a senior, and like it's honestly, I wouldn't be who I am today without the influence of Louisville Girls Leadership.
See, that just does my heart so good.
It does. Like, I think I want to run for office too, and I'm older, because I'm looking into political science for college, and like I just like, it's my passion. So.
Well, that's just wonderful. And you've got that great role model, Attica Scott.
Yeah.
She is
great.
just over the top. I mean, that's right. And so that's the important thing about, I mean, if people don't understand, and I didn't even understand the connection between public policy and the quality of life for people. You know, the need for adequate funding for child care and paid medical and family leave. I mean, women are put at such a disadvantage. They're supposed to do everything, take care of the kids.
Right.
And in today's society, women are expected, you know, to bring home as much money as the man and support the family. So it's an unbelievable burden without the adequate public policy that supports family. I mean, that's the thing that just makes me furious is our country, as you know, leading country in the world, so to speak, we have very poor policies it comes to supporting children. That's our future. And now, like college students, they are paying a tax on all this high tuition. The people least can afford this high tuition, you know, and then they're just letting wealthy people off the hook. So anyway, don't get me started on that. There's so many issues. It's like you just have to speak up and say no.
I know.
This is not acceptable. Anyway.
And then, according to I'm interviewing men and women for this project to get the perspective of both genders. So these are the questions I asked the men and the women. But according to Merriam-Webster, feminism is the belief that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities. Do you agree with this definition? Why or why not?
I absolutely believe that women and men are equal. And so, someone who says they're not a feminist, they don't understand what the word feminist is. They just think it's a bunch of angry women. No, it's just women who want to be treated as equals.
So you consider yourself a feminist?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not only a feminist, I'm a die-hard feminist.
Me too.
Okay.
Do you feel like the representation of women in government is particularly low in the U.S.? Why or why not?
Yes, it is particularly low in the U.S. And I think the reason why is because, once again, women are so busy taking care of their families and just struggling to try to get through the day.
Right.
They don't have the time or the leisure. Men, I mean, if women had wives, so, men have wives to take care of, a lot of them do, take care of the home front. I mean, I do see society changing because it seems like men are getting a little bit more involved, some men, with a family responsibility, but it's the gender roles are just not fair, and the gender roles, and plus it goes back to women believing they can run, having a political network. Women think that someone needs to ask them to run.
Right.
Men don't think they have to be asked. They just say they're going to run. Women don't need someone to ask them to run. They can just run too.
Right.
So, and it's just, no, so it's not equal at all. And I think that I'm not bashing men. We need the balance. We need both the men and the women working together cooperatively to create better public policy for all.
And then, did you know, I'm sure you knew some of this, but women make up 51% of the U.S. population, but only make up 17% of the government. The U.S. ranks 98th in the world for percentage of women in its national legislature, with Rwanda being number 1, having 49% of their government being made of women. And if the U.S. stays at this exact rate of women being represented in our government, it will take 500 years for us to catch up and be equally represented in Congress.
Right, I am familiar with that. And you can just see in this presidential campaign how Hillary has to be 25 times better.
Right.
I mean, she's like 2,000 times better than her opponent. And they still beating up on her about stuff that's totally irrelevant.
Right.
And he is just like the epitome. He should be in jail a long time ago.
Right.
But anyway, don't get me going on that. But it just shows you the obstacles. But I think the fact that Hillary's running is going to inspire young women and even little girls to think, oh, well, women can be president, sure. So it's a game changer. But we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, especially the fact too that this isn't like her first time running. She keeps trying and trying, and I give her so much respect and props for that.
And she is so tough, and that's the good one thing about it. She says you have to have hippopotamus skin, really thick skin, and I think that that's a problem with females. They get their feelings hurt, and they get mad. And one thing I learned about politics. Don't burn bridges. I mean, somebody may offend you or whatever, but you just keep on working with that person, no matter how. I mean, just like Hillary and Obama. I mean, that was a really hard-fought race.
It was.
But then, after it was over with, they worked together. I think Obama was very pleased with her Secretary of State. So.
But yeah. And then in what ways do you think society can better motivate girls and women to actively participate in leadership roles in the society?
Well, I think that society needs to give girls more leadership training opportunities, and that's why I think Little Girls Leadership is so important. That is, we need more, opportunities for girls to be taught, how to do public speaking skills, how to hold press conferences, how to, raise money. Girls need to be taught all those things. And then we'll have more balance, but it's going to take a conscious effort by groups to teach a new generation of women's leaders. And that's the one reason I wanted to start Little Girls Leadership is because statistically, Kentucky was like number 48 in the nation in terms of status of Kentucky women, in terms of educational attainment, income, health, political participation. So I thought, if we're going to change these statistics, we've got to start with the girls who can help change these statistics.
And then, if this was your project and you had to create an art piece that represents women in government, how do you think you would best represent that?
Well, the art that I've been wanting for a long time is a statue of a woman in the Kentucky State Capitol. Have you ever been to Frankfurt before?
Yes.
The State Capitol, have you seen the dolls? Well, the dolls are all the first ladies except Martha Wayne Collins. And so we have all these school children that come to the Capitol. And see, that was really, I got that started to put those portraits of women in the hallway. But all they saw was men, leaders, dolls, and the dolls. And so, people love the dolls. But most of those dolls were there. It's called reflective power. It's who you marry that you get power. You did not earn it in your own right. And so we need I always wanted Emma Guy Cronwell to have a statue of her, and most people don't know about Emma Guy Cronwell. but her husband and son died, and so she decided to dedicate herself to public service. You might want to read her book sometime. And so she was elected to the state librarian before women had the right to vote. And when women did get the right to vote, she ran for and won Secretary of State in like 1923 or something like that. So she did really good things as Secretary of State. She saved all the original historical documents that were just thrown in the basement, and the men were making fun of her, just like a woman saving that stuff. She also then ran for state treasurer and only won by 300 votes because they didn't think women could handle money. But it's a good thing she won because she had instituted this very sound fiscal policy that the state's money was not all in one bank. She had a different place. And then there was the stock market crash. And the state would have lost all their money if they had listened to the men. And then she went on, it was the New Deal. She got to be head of the state parks, and she got all this federal money that's built up the state parks today.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, her, and the thing about it is she believed girls should be taught political science.
Gotcha.
So, anyway.
Yeah. And those are all the questions
So,
I
are you going
have.
to do an art project?
Yes, I'm taking like the stuff from